Let me tell you something real this morning, something they won't say out loud, but they sure think it every time you walk in that room with your head high and your standards higher. When you're a high, Val, you woman, baby, jealous folks will talk. They gon' say everything, and none of it's the truth. Why? 'Cause truth hurts, and when people ain't healed, when they ain't grown, when they ain't walked in their own purpose. The sight of a strong woman with direction is like sunlight to a vampire. It burns, you show up bold, they whisper, she thinks she better than us. You speak confidently, they mumble, she too loud. You stay to yourself and don't entertain nonsense, she stuck up. But here's what they don't understand, your silence ain't arrogance, it's discipline. Your standards ain't pride, it's self-respect. Your glow ain't makeup, it's peace. And your walk, that's purpose, honey. That's what got 'em shook. See, they only say, she doing too much, because they doing too little. They only call you too independent, because they still waiting on somebody to come fix their life. And when they say, she too picky, what they really mean is, she ain't settling for the mess I settled for. Let them talk. Let them gossip. You don't have to explain your shine to people who never left the shade. You don't owe clarity to people who choose confusion. Keep shining, keep building, keep praying, and keep pushing. Because what they call too much is just enough for the right destiny. She thinks she all that means you're walking in confidence, not arrogance. You ever notice how the moment a woman starts believing in herself, folks get uncomfortable? Oh, it's all good when she's quiet, unsure, second, guessing everything she does. But let her start walking with her head high, let her start speaking with clarity, let her start dressing like she owns her value now all of a sudden. She thinks she all that. Ain't that something? They say it like it's an insult, but really, it's a reflection of what they ain't got. Confidence makes insecure people itch. It makes them squirm, because when you love yourself out loud, it reminds them of how quietly they tolerate less. So when they say, she thinks she all that, what they're really saying is, she carries the kind of belief in herself that I wish I had. See, confidence ain't arrogance. Confidence is knowing who you are, what you bring, and what you deserve. Arrogance wants to be better than others. Confidence just wants to be whole. But folks who ain't whole don't know the difference. So they confuse your peace with pride. They confuse your vision with vanity. And they confuse your strength with superiority. Let them confuse it. That ain't your problem. You didn't rise up out of depression, fight through heartbreak, grind through struggle just to shrink for people who never even clapped when you were down. You walked through fire. You overcame what should have broke you. You prayed through nights you didn't think you'd survive. And now you're shining. Don't you dare apologize for it. They gon' say it. Trust me. Especially when you ain't trying to blend in. Especially when you don't wait for permission to speak. Especially when your presence speaks before you do. That makes people nervous. And people who are nervous will always try to reduce you so they can feel safe. But you weren't born to play small so others can feel tall. You were born to shine so others can find the light. And if your shine exposes someone else's shadow, that ain't your fault. That's their healing to do. You keep walking. Hi, Val. You woman don't need to prove anything to anyone. She don't need to explain why she carries herself with grace, how she protects her peace, or why she won't chase no man who don't see her worth. She just lives her truth loud and unapologetic. Because when you know your value, you stop negotiating it. When you know your power, you stop explaining it. When you know your destiny, you stop asking for directions from folks who never left the driveway. So when they say, she thinks she all that, smile. That means they noticed. That means you're showing up. That means you're no longer hiding, and they ain't used to that. They used to the quiet version of you, the version that doubted herself, settled for less, and stayed silent to keep the peace. But not anymore. Now you're glowing. Now you're growing. Now you're choosing purpose over people. peace over pressure and standards over struggle. That's what scares them, not your volume, not your outfit, not your attitude, your growth. Let them talk. Jealousy never said anything worth listening to, but it always exposes who can't handle your next level. And guess what? You were never made to fit in rooms where your spirit had to shrink. Because, baby, when you walk like you belong, when you speak like you matter, and when you move like you've been through something and came out wiser, the insecure will always whisper, "She thinks she all that." And your only response should be, "You're right, she too picky," means you've got standards they couldn't keep up with. Let's get one thing straight right now: having standards is not a flaw. It's a form of self-respect. But every time a woman decides she won't just take whatever's offered, here come the critics saying, "She too picky." No, she's not too picky. She's too grown to settle for less than what she's worth. That phrase right there, too picky. That's what people say when they realize they can't manipulate you. When you know what you want, and more importantly, what you won't tolerate, it rubs the wrong people the wrong way. You start getting labeled. You ain't labeled because you're difficult. You're labeled because you're clear. See, when a woman starts turning down situations that don't serve her, relationships that don't value her, and people who drain her, the world gets uncomfortable. You were supposed to say yes to anything, right? You were supposed to be flattered by bare minimum, right? But now that you know better and demand better, they say you're picky. Well, let them say it. Because the truth is, when you've healed, when you've grown, and when you know what peace feels like, you refuse to entertain confusion just to say you got somebody. You'd rather wait alone than settle together. That ain't pickiness, that's wisdom. They'll say, "She act like no man is good enough for her." Nah, she knows a good man is out there, she just refuses to build with one who still acts like a boy. She's not chasing potential. She's aligning with purpose, and not everybody's ready for that. That's why they call it picky, because prepared sounds too much like accountability. And let's be real, most of the people calling you picky settled for less themselves. So your discipline feels like judgment to them. It reminds them of what they compromised on, of what they accepted out of fear or loneliness or pressure. And now that you're saying no to what they said yes to, they feel attacked. You ain't too picky for not wanting to raise a grown man. You ain't too picky for wanting consistency over charm. You ain't too picky for wanting love that doesn't come with betrayal, lies, or emotional games. You're just not desperate, and that's rare. So of course they'll mislabel you. And this ain't just about relationships. It's about jobs, friendships, environments. Hi Val, you women are selective with everything who they let in their space, who they take advice from, who they share their dreams with. Because peace is expensive, and once you've paid for it, you don't let just anybody come in and tear it down. Now listen, being selective doesn't mean being impossible. It means you've got vision, and vision requires clarity. You don't just accept what shows up. You wait for what aligns. You ain't chasing temporary relief. You're building lasting joy. That takes patience, that takes focus, and yet it takes being picky. People who don't value themselves will always question why you value yourself so much. People who are used to being chosen for convenience won't understand why you only move with intention. But don't you dare lower your standards to make them comfortable. Your future deserves the version of you that doesn't settle. You ain't asking for perfect. You're asking for present, respectful, honest, consistent, and loving. That's not too much. That's bare minimum. And if someone tells you otherwise, it means they never intended to meet it. They just hoped you'd drop it. Your life is too precious to fill with wrong energy. You've cried too many tears, grown through too many storms, prayed through too many battles to end up with less than what you were promised. If that makes you picky, then so be it. Let them say it. Let them misunderstand. Your standards are not the problem. Their inability to meet them is, but that's not your burden to carry. You're not here to babysit potential. You're here to build legacy. So next time they say, "She too picky," look them in the eye, smile, and say, "No, baby. I'm just finally choosing me." "She doing too much," is said by those doing the bare minimum. Ain't it funny how the moment you start stepping into excellence, here come the voices saying, "She doing too much." They don't say it when you're quiet. They don't say it when you're doubting yourself. They only start talking when you start walking in purpose, with power, with passion, and with plans. See, people who aren't doing enough will always be uncomfortable around someone who's doing more than what they settled for. You showing up early, you doing too much, you dressing sharp every day, you doing too much, you speaking up for yourself in meetings, saying no to nonsense, setting boundaries with grace. Oh, now, you extra. No, baby. You're not extra. You're essential. You're setting the standard they told themselves they couldn't reach. You're choosing growth over gossip. And when people are used to average, excellence feels like an insult. You ain't doing too much. You're just no longer doing just enough. They want you to shrink. They want you to fit the mold they're stuck in. So the moment you step outside of it, the moment you upgrade your circle, your habits, your mind, you become a mirror. You reflect their laziness, their fear, their indecision, and instead of changing, they throw shade. But don't you dare shrink to make someone else feel tall. You didn't wake up every day to be mediocre. You didn't survive everything you went through just to blend in. If it makes them uncomfortable, that's between them and their own reflection, because your elevation isn't for their validation. Hi, Val, you women don't ask for permission to evolve. They move different, they talk different, they live with vision, and yes, they make people uncomfortable. That ain't arrogance, that's alignment. That's what people don't understand. They'll say, "She always doing the most." Just because you plan ahead, just because you won't tolerate mess, just because you won't say yes to low vibration company, but they never stop to ask, why does it bother them so much? It's because your discipline exposes their excuses. Listen, anybody can show up once, but to be consistent, to be intentional, to do the little things every day with excellence, that's rare, that's power, and yes, that's work. That's why they say you're doing too much, because they can't keep up with what you make look easy. But let's get one thing straight. Your effort is not a flaw. Your discipline is not a weakness. Your consistency is not for show, it's for your future. They don't see what you're building. They don't see the nights you prayed. They don't see the battles you fought in silence. So don't let their noise distract you from your purpose. They're not mad at your hustle. They're mad at the fact that your hustle makes them question why they stopped trying. Your fire makes their comfort feel like chains, so of course they say you're doing too much. They want you to stay small, so they don't have to grow. But small is over. Playing it safe is over. Asking for permission is over. You're not here to impress the crowd, you're here to impact the world. And impact always requires motion, risk, effort, and boldness. Let the crowd call that too much, because the crowd never built anything worth remembering. Every woman who's ever changed the game had people whispering behind her back. Every woman who's ever stepped into greatness was misunderstood. So if they're saying you're doing too much, congratulations. That means you're finally walking in rooms your younger self used to pray for. Let them talk. Let them whisper, let them label, but you keep doing too much, because too much is what builds legacies. Too much is what breaks generational curses. Too much is what makes history, and the bare minimum, that's not your language. She too independent, comes from those still depending on approval. Let's break this down real quick when a woman gets her own. handles her business, pays her bills, sets her boundaries, and walks in peace without begging for validation, people don't clap for her. You know what they do. They get uncomfortable, and they start throwing labels like, she too independent. But too independent for who? For what? That statement don't come from a place of observation, it comes from a place of intimidation. It ain't that you're too independent. It's that your independence exposes how some people still rely on others for identity, worth, and direction. See, when you no longer wait to be rescued, some folks feel useless. When you no longer chase love, chase clout, or chase attention, you become a problem for people who use dependency to control. And trust me, the moment they can't manipulate you, they call you difficult. They say you don't need a man, like it's a sin. No, baby, you don't chase one. There's a difference. You desire connection, but you don't beg for it. You desire love, but you don't sell your soul to keep it. You know your value whether someone else sees it or not. That's not arrogance, that's growth. Too independent really means you don't tolerate nonsense. It means you don't fold just to fit in. It means you've spent time alone long enough to fall in love with your own peace. And that scares people who have never stood on their own 2 feet. The truth is, independence is dangerous to people who thrive on control. They don't want a partner, they want a puppet. And when you cut those strings, when you start thinking for yourself, praying for yourself, building for yourself, suddenly you're too much. That's just code for, I can't handle a woman who doesn't need me to complete her. But you're not here to be completed. You're already whole. You're not here to be carried. You got legs, faith, and a fire that won't quit. So if they can't match your strength, let them fall behind. You were never built to shrink into dependency just to keep someone else's ego warm. Let's be real, independence ain't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing you can if you need to. It's about not settling for disrespect because you fear being alone. It's about loving yourself so much that you no longer trade peace for company. That's not pride, that's protection. Some folks are used to codependency. That's their comfort zone. But just because they don't understand your standards doesn't mean you have to lower them. Just because they need someone to validate their every move doesn't mean you have to question your own. Your independence is a threat to people who relied on your weakness. Now that you're strong, they lost their grip. Now that you wise, they lost their game. Now that you healed, they lost control. And instead of leveling up, they'd rather label you. Don't apologize for evolving. Don't dim your light because someone else refuses to grow. You didn't go through hell just to hand your power over to someone who never earned it. You didn't heal just to settle for emotional crumbs. And let's be clear, a real man ain't intimidated by your independence. A real friend won't feel threatened by your growth. Real ones celebrate it, support it, and match it. Only the insecure try to shame you for being whole. So when they say, she too independent, smile. That means you've broken the chains. That means you've stepped into your own. That means they can't use your past, your pain, or your loneliness against you anymore. She stuck up is just code for she won't entertain mess. Let's clear something up right now. They don't call you stuck up because you think you're better than everybody else. They say it because you know better than to waste time with just anybody. When a woman stops giving her energy to drama, chaos, and clown behavior, the ones who live in that mess call it attitude. No, baby, that's standards. See, stuck up don't mean rude. It don't mean fake. It don't mean cold. It means selective. It means you don't let just anybody talk to you any kind of way. You don't let just anybody enter your space, speak over your peace, or play games with your time. And when you stop entertaining nonsense, guess what? The nonsense gets offended. They say you're stuck up because you're not falling for the charm they use on everyone else. You're not fooled by empty words, fake support, or surface-level energy. You don't smile just to be polite. You don't play along when you know something ain't right. You move with purpose, not popularity. That's what throws them off. The truth is, you used to entertain mess. You used to stay in rooms that drained you. You used to laugh when things weren't funny, stay silent when things hurt, and keep connections just to avoid confrontation. But now you've grown. Now you value your peace more than fake friendships. Now your silence ain't fear, it's wisdom. So when they say you're stuck up, that's just code for she won't let me waste her time no more. That's code for she's not clapping for things that don't align with her anymore. That's code for she's protecting herself from people like me. Let them say it. Let them mislabel you. You weren't born to please people who expect you to sacrifice yourself just to keep them comfortable. You weren't built to blend in with people who never learned how to grow. You weren't created to be liked by everybody, especially not the ones who don't like themselves. You're not mean. You're not bitter. You're not arrogant. You're just done. Done explaining yourself. Done apologizing for evolving. Done entertaining circles that only spin in chaos. Done giving time to people who wouldn't give you truth. And here's what they really can't handle: you're not accessible like you used to be. You don't answer every call. You don't respond to every message. You don't show up just because you're expected to. You now understand that your energy is sacred, and if they don't respect it, they can't have it. That boundary, it's not pride. It's protection, that distance. It's not punishment, it's peace. That silence, it's not shade. It's self-respect. And the people who never had boundaries of their own will always misinterpret yours. But you're not here to live in confusion. You're not here to explain to grown people why you won't tolerate disrespect. If they want access to you, they need to show consistency, not convenience. They need to bring truth, not tension. Every time a hive, Val, you woman chooses peace over popularity, purpose over noise, discipline over attention, somebody out there will call her stuck up. Not because she's wrong, but because her evolution feels like rejection to people still stuck in cycles. And baby, you don't need to come down just to make someone else feel tall. You don't need to lower your standards to keep friends who were never your supporters in the first place. You don't need to keep explaining your silence to people who only understand chaos. So if they call you stuck up because you mind your business, protect your space, and choose growth, wear that label like a crown, because what they call stuck up, heaven calls set apart. She always alone means you're focused, not lonely. People love to misunderstand a woman who chooses her own company. You walk into a room by yourself, they whisper. You take a solo trip, they judge. You cut off fake friends, let go of draining relationships, and now you're called weird, antisocial, or too isolated. Nah, you're not lonely, you're focused. See, the world don't know what to do with a woman who doesn't need a crowd to feel valuable. Most folks are so used to running in packs that when someone walks alone, they think something's wrong. But hive, Val, you women aren't afraid of silence. They thrive in it. They don't need noise to feel alive, they've got purpose. And don't get it twisted, just because she's alone doesn't mean she's empty. It means she's full of vision, full of strategy, full of discipline, full of boundaries, because it takes strength to be alone without being lonely. It takes maturity to choose solitude over fake support. They'll say she always alone, like that's a weakness. But baby, that's your strength. That means you ain't desperate for attention. You ain't out here chasing validation. You ain't staying in toxic rooms just to feel accepted. You know how to enjoy your own presence, and that makes you dangerous in the best way. You ever notice how the loudest people got the weakest circles, always surrounded by somebody, but none of them pour into each other? Always posting, always talking, always around noise but no peace. Meanwhile, you've learned how to recharge in silence. You've learned how to build in quiet. That's power. They don't understand that your alone season is your preparation season. That's where the clarity comes in. That's where the healing happens. That's where you get your mind right. You're not being isolated, you're being elevated. But people who fear their own thoughts will always misjudge a woman who can sit still. They think being alone is punishment, but to a high Val, you woman, being alone is protection. It's a filter. It weeds out distractions. It exposes leeches. It saves energy for the right people and the right purpose. So if they can't understand your distance, let them keep guessing. You don't owe an explanation for choosing peace. They'll say, she don't mess with nobody. That's right, you don't mess with confusion. You don't mess with fake energy. You don't mess with people who only show up when they need something. Your silence speaks volumes, and the people who don't listen still get the message. You're not hiding, you're evolving. You're not running, you're rising. You're not afraid of people, you're just no longer wasting time trying to please the wrong ones. And yes, that means some days will feel quiet. But it's in those quiet moments that your strength gets louder. Let them think you're always alone. That just means you're not easy to access. That just means not everyone qualifies for your time. That just means you'd rather build alone than break trying to fit in. That's not loneliness, that's legacy work. You've cried in that silence. You've healed in that silence. You've grown in that silence. And you ain't about to trade that for shallow company just to look busy. Let them hang in crowds that drain them. You're too focused on what you're building. Because one thing's for sure when the vision comes to life, when the fruit starts showing, when the light gets too bright to ignore the same people who said she always alone. We'll suddenly want a seat at your table, but by then you'll know the value of your peace too well to give it away for free. Let them misunderstand your solitude. Let them call it strange. You weren't created to live for their approval. You're not building a crowd, you're building a kingdom. And some seasons require you to walk alone, so you never forget who carried you. She thinks she better is jealousy dressed in small talk. Let's go ahead and call it what it is. That line, she thinks she better than us. That's not real criticism. That's jealousy in disguise. It's not truth. It's projection. That phrase gets tossed around not because you're walking in pride, but because you stopped walking in circles with people who chose to stay stuck. You know when they start saying that, when you start making better choices, when you stop showing up to the gossip, when you stop answering toxic calls, when your clothes change, your attitude shifts, your circle shrinks, and your mind gets sharper. That's when the whispers begin. She thinks she better. Nah, she just finally woke up. You can tell when someone's operating from insecurity because they twist your growth into insult. The moment you start talking different, they say you switched up. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, they say you acting funny. But really, you just found your worth, and now they don't recognize you in strength because they only knew you in struggle. They want you to stay where you were confused, broken, apologetic, and unsure. Because that version of you was manageable. That version didn't have boundaries. That version didn't have confidence. But now you carry yourself like someone with purpose, and that threatens people who still haven't met theirs. See, when a woman rises, she makes people face the truth about themselves, and not everyone is ready to do that. So instead of growing with you, they gossip about you. Instead of leveling up, they tear you down. It's easier to label you than to look inward and admit, I gave up on myself when she didn't. Let them talk. Their words say more about them than they ever will about you, because real ones don't resent your growth, they cheer for it. But insecure people, they call confidence arrogance, they call clarity attitude, they call elevation betrayal, and when they say you think you better, what they really mean is you stopped settling where they stayed. But you didn't survive what you survived just to stay small. You didn't cry those tears, break those chains, and heal those wounds just to remain acceptable to people who only loved the weak version of you. Growth is not disrespect. Boundaries are not betrayal. And success is not arrogance. And here's the truth: you never said you were better. You just stopped lowering yourself. And that's the part that stings. Because when you start requiring more, expecting more, and walking like you deserve more, the people who gave you less start panicking. But let's be clear, their comfort is not your responsibility. Their stagnation is not your ceiling. If they wanted to grow, they'd grow with you. But instead, they sit back and say, "She thinks she better." That's not an insult. That's a sign you've outgrown the environment. You don't need to defend yourself against jealousy. You don't need to shrink yourself for fragile egos. The same folks saying that line today will be quoting you tomorrow when they finally realize you weren't trying to be better than them. You were trying to be better than who you used to be. And if they can't see that, that's not your problem. You don't owe them your potential in pieces just to protect their pride. You don't owe them access to your glow just because they feel dim. If your growth hurts them, it means they were never rooting for you to win unless it kept them comfortable. Let them say it. Let them mumble. Let them misunderstand. Their words don't stop your progress. Their opinions don't delay your calling. Keep walking, keep building, keep growing, because every time they say, "She thinks she better," you ought to smile, because that means they notice the difference. Not better than them, better than before. That's the only competition, and you winning. Now let me close this out by saying something every high. Al, you woman needs to hear you are not crazy, arrogant, or difficult. You are evolving. And anytime a woman evolves, anytime she starts standing taller, speaking clearer, walking lighter, and living bolder, folks who ain't moved in years gone have something slick to say. Let them say you think you all that. You are. Let them say you too picky. You've earned that right. Let them say you doing too much. You're building too much to do less. Let them call you too independent, too stuck up, too alone, too different because you were never made to fit in with people who fear becoming more. The words they throw at you are not descriptions, they're confessions. Confessions that your growth exposed their comfort zone. Confessions that your confidence challenges their insecurity. Confessions that your discipline shines a light on their laziness. And instead of clapping, they criticize. But you just keep climbing. Don't stop walking because they talking. Don't stop growing because they guessing. Don't stop shining because they squinting. You didn't go through every sleepless night, every toxic cycle, every spiritual storm just to turn around now because somebody jealous got a loud mouth and a weak heart. Keep your head high, your circle tight, your standards firm, and your spirit clean. Because every word they use to try and tear you down is just proof you already elevated above the noise. They gossip, you grow. They assume, you align. They talk, you build. And one day, when that crown on your head is shining so bright they can't ignore it, when your name is tied to excellence, when your legacy is felt in rooms you haven't even stepped in, those same people will have no choice but to admit it. She didn't think she was better. She just refused to settle for less. So walk like you're chosen. Talk like you're covered. Move like you've got destiny in your DNA. And remember, jealousy ain't about you. It's about what they refuse to become. You're not too much. You're just enough for the life God designed for you. Now go live it loud, proud, and unapologetically, Hive. Al, you